Welcome to episode 18 of the Courageous Coach podcast. The podcast where we pull back the curtain on what it really takes to be courageous with our clients, our business and our lives. I'm your host, Melissa Haig. In this episode, I'm joined by Jo Hartley. Jo and I explore her transformative journey from being a doctor to becoming a coach. We chat about the challenges of identity shifts, the impact of burnout, and the importance of authenticity in coaching. Jo shares her experiences of navigating the complexities of being an expert while also embracing vulnerability, and how she's learned to create a coaching space that allows clients to explore their own journeys. We discuss the need for boundaries, the human side of medicine, and the courage required to be authentic in our practice. Jo reflects on her experiences, the lessons learned in her first 2 years of business, and the significance of trusting yourself in the coaching journey. So, are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to the Courageous Coach podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether you're listening or watching us, it's lovely to have you with us. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Jo Hartley. Thank you so much for being here, Jo. I really appreciate you agreeing to come along and have this conversation with me. And I was reflecting before you joined, and then we were just chatting about it as well, because I was thinking, our relationship, our working relationship, it's been going for a little while now, and I was reflecting on the fact that, you know, I've been working with Jo. Jo did her ILM coach qualification with me when she was a internal coach, and then she stepped out and she has her own coaching practice, which I'm sure she'll tell you all about. And we've been on the courage building journey together. Jo's been on my Dare to Lead program. We've done some supervision work. And so it's been just the most joyful experience, privilege really for me to see Jo's whole journey from kind of discovering or formalizing her coaching practice, and then making that bold step into her own business, and then seeing her business develop and her develop as a coach. It's just been joyous for me. One of those really special relationships. So I'm really excited to have Jo here. And I have no idea where the conversation is going to go. So I'm curious to see what's going to come out. So Jo, welcome. And thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Melissa. It's lovely. Thank you so much for asking me.
Okay. Well, look, we'll start where we always do, which is, Jo, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So pause, think. I'm turning up as a coach today. And that actually is a first statement is really important, because for a lot of years I identified as a doctor. And actually my sort of lean into courage these days is actually, although I'm a doctor, I'm a coach first. And that's very much the journey I've been on with you over the last couple of years, really. And moving away from my medical practice into a coach. I still coach for doctors, but learning not to identify myself and put my expert hat on, and potentially sit back and lean much more into myself as an individual and be the coach.
I love this idea of identifying, right? Because it is a big identity shift, right? When we move from employed life into self-employed life, actually, whatever that self-employed life looks like for us, right? But as coaches, it is an identity shift. Our identity changes, and we have to our identity changes, and there's a discomfort in that, and we have to find ourselves again, and all of those kind of things. And to have come from, I mean, I know that was hard for me, coming from a corporate, background, and having been, in the sort of same profession my whole career, and then suddenly I'm a coach. But for me, there was a real link between what I did as a career, so learning and development, and then, becoming a coach. So, but I'm wondering for you, because I kind of hear doctor and coach. Now, for me, looking outside in, I'm like, okay, well, they're two quite different identities, really quite different identities. So what's the work been like there, Jo, to really kind of create that shift?
So you're right. They are very, very different identities. And I suppose probably it's worth giving you a little bit of context. So I've been a doctor working within the NHS for over 30 years, and I had a medical education portfolio. I became a consultant in emergency medicine in 2007 and had a family at the same time, and was juggling an increasing interest in medical education. So working with individuals, working with people, and going into leadership roles, and beginning to sort of get more used to sort of that softer skill set, I think. I then in 2016 had my own brush with burnout. And I think that was probably the first time that I recognised my own vulnerability. I've been quite fortunate up to then. You things get tough, but you put your foot on the gas and you get over the humps and you crack on. And I just went out of steam is the honest answer. And it started my own self-exploration journey and understanding what was going on. I've always been very much needing to understand things, to learn and move beyond that. And I did that very much as a medic. And so I started exploring what it was about me that made me vulnerable to burnout. I mean, to be honest, it was a fairly challenging work-life environment. I'd got 3 children. I had got lots of other roles, and I'm quite a perfectionist. There were lots of reasons why I was very vulnerable in that situation. And I needed to know that. And I didn't have enough understanding of psychology to really work out why I, amongst my peer group, were finding things more challenging potentially than others. And it was also tied up with a huge amount of shame, actually, the honest answer, because, it's not something that you want to talk about. And so from my own perspective, I needed to explore. So I undertook a counselling qualification at that time, typical doctor, and I know coach, if you don't understand something, you do a course on it. So I did a level 2 certificate in counselling. Really enjoyed it. Lots of complementary skills as associated with coaching. But there was a bit of frustration in that, because actually there was a lot of people, and it felt the therapeutic aspect of it was similar to my doctoring, and actually it kind of didn't work because I wanted to doctor rather than listen.
Yes, okay.
But it was the first time I picked up something slightly outside of medicine and recognised that this might be something I'd like to do a bit more of. And so over the course of the next couple of years, I used my lived experience to start working with doctors in training who were finding training more challenging. And I felt that, my own vulnerability and my own understanding of what was going on made me feel that I felt I had the empathy skills to work with them, to support them, to move forward. And so as part of that, coaching really was one of the skills that I should have. Then the pandemic hit.
Okay.
All study leave kind of got stopped. And by the end of and within the pandemic, I did a lot of support for other people and a lot of listening for people, and realised how much I enjoyed it. So come to the end of the pandemic, I decided it was time for some more CPD. And I signed up with a coaching diploma. So this is where I did Tom Dillon's diploma. But literally a month after I'd signed up for that, which was coming from my own funding, my trust advertised the ILM 5, which is where I met you. Because actually there was an opportunity not only to have another bit of learning, but also the opportunity to work as a trust coach, which I thought would be invaluable. I've often, although I predominantly coach doctors, I have coached across the multi-professional team, and actually I love doing that as well. So that was a really good opportunity. And then I think, as you know, I also had the opportunity through my professional support and wellbeing, which is where I work with junior doctors, to do a postgraduate certificate in career development at the same time that was offered to me. So I didn't just pick up a bit of CPD. I did 3 courses all at the same time, which was fairly typical, and quite hard going at that time.
Yeah.
I had I had lots of skills at the end of that.
Yeah.
In order to and realised I absolutely loved coaching.
Yeah, I feel like you found your thing.
Yeah.
Right? In inverted commas, whatever that thing is, for sure. And you know what strikes me, Jo, is that I talk from my own experience and in terms of supporting coaches through their early development, right, through ILM programs. But also this piece for me around courageous coaching, which comes for me later, not a particular time later, but later, because I believe you need the skills, the fundamental skills, the fundamental understanding of what coaching is and what it isn't. But what I'm really curious for you, because I know your journey. It's not my journey, but I know it, right? And so I remember us being together on that ILM, and you asked lots of great questions, which is always a good sign. I always think when someone's, curious, and curious enough to ask questions, it's usually a sign that, there's a coach in there wanting to get out. Right. But that was very much the kind of, asking great questions, listening. Here's the grow model, here's how you contract, all the really kind of fundamental stuff. And then we did the Dare to Lead program together, which is much more about, who you are and how you want to show up. And since then, I think, broadly speaking, we've been on the kind of, who are you as a coach? Who are you becoming? What kind of coach do you want to be? So you're almost the carbon copy. Is that, I don't know if that's the right term, but like the carbon copy of how I see coach development happening, and also the way I see my role in supporting that coach development in the various bits of my business, right? And so I guess because I'm sat here, that's what I'm thinking. I now feel like I want to check in. And is that how you view your journey, your coach development journey, or do you see it differently? Or have I missed something maybe?
I don't think you've missed anything at all, actually, Melissa. That's been one of the reasons why it's been so fantastic to check in with you over that part of that time. You've provided a degree of sort of accountability and knowledge and wisdom and empathy and support along that way, which has been really helpful, because it did take a lot of courage. And I think almost in answer to one of your previous questions, but bringing it forward, actually the difference between being a doctor and being a coach is actually quite big. I go into the doctor and I am the expert. I'm expected to know. And, I liked knowing. And actually, I was a pretty experienced doctor. And that's where I felt comfortable in that. And so much of being a coach is, in fact, taking off all of that. It's turning up with authenticity, isn't it? With your own and being your own self in that space, so that you can allow the other person to take off all of that armor, so they can be vulnerable and they can be open and they can move forward on their own journeys. And so you talk about, as I did the ILM stuff, it's all about being the expert, ticking the boxes, getting it right, understanding a framework, following that pathway. And I can remember having conversations with you at the time about, was it okay to kind of give some advice at this point? Because obviously doctors are always full of advice, and I don't really feel like I've value added to anything unless I've given you my pearls of really amazing wisdom that I've been carrying for so long. And then actually it's been able to gradually let that go as I've built up in confidence. And recognise that actually the less I go in without that agenda and allowing to be to work with my client is the power behind that. And not only from the coaching conversation, But also what I'm recognizing as I've moved forward from a business perspective is to go in actually with my own vulnerability and share and be open and talk about my lived experience as a doctor. So I work with a lot of medical clients, and they might be doctors in training, but actually my real passion and niche is to work with people like I was, actually consultants who established, who are having challenges in the workplace. It is an extremely challenging, pressurized environment. And actually, we all find it challenging at times. And so having, sharing my own vulnerabilities can sometimes be an opportunity for others to share and learn and understand. And so, I'm beginning to realize that the expert in me is not needed in my coaching role. And I think one of my biggest challenges is to go into that feeling as comfortable as I can.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if, certainly for me, because we've talked before about, that struggle of letting go of the expert, letting go of being right and having the answers and so on. And I think, that whole thing, it's not about, I can, I've ditched that now. I no longer need to be the expert. It's more about, or I no longer want to be the expert. It's more about how do I manage that when it creeps up from, for me, it always creeps up from my belly, right? And just comes up a little bit and goes, hello, you know the answer to this. And okay, what do I do in that moment, right? What's my choice? And also, I guess, letting go of the idea that the only way I add value is to share my expertise or to give an answer, or to fix. I mean, I'm imagining, from a doctor's perspective, not only are you expected to be the expert, but you're also expected to fix me. And I mean, of course, sadly, sometimes you can't, but nonetheless, that's what people come to you for, right? Make me feel better. Fix me.
Yeah. And actually, that's quite a lot of that job satisfaction that you get at the end, feeling like you value added. You come to me, I value add, and you walk away and you feel better. And so just to sit there and, I work with some clients where don't really get much of a word in edgeways, actually. It's just and I'm sitting there thinking, sure, I must be able to create some value here. But no, I've sat in that discomfort and they've gone, wow, that was a really great session. I think, yeah, you have just talked for the last hour or 90 minutes, but that's what they needed. And I think, so I think what I'm recognizing is that often I'm working with very resourceful individuals. And so therefore, the less that I do, the better they're thinking moving forward. It's not always easy. And I think, we've had conversations before, but I don't just coach. I also work in a support role and actually I can, and there is a requirement sometimes to offer advice, to do some mentoring and some coaching, depending on how resourceful the individual in front of me is. And so I can occasionally slip into bad habits, but I'm getting better at it. It was, I think, that sort of transition for me when I left clinical practice, which was 2 years ago, and started to do more coaching. I then started to recognize and just be more intentional and more aware of what I'm doing in the coaching room. You get the basic foundational skills, don't you? And you can put it in practice. You can have a chemistry call and you can do the GROW model and you can do all of those bits and pieces. And then actually, once you don't have questions sitting in your head the whole time, there's a bit more space to start thinking about what's going on, thinking about what's happening within the coaching space and looking at what the client in front of you needs at that time. And so I've been able to step back a bit, but it does mean that I will make a judgment call on how resourceful the person in front of me is. Yeah. And I think sometimes people are varying resourceful. I won't obviously tell you how old I am exactly, but I am getting towards the end of my medical career. And actually, I will often contract with doctors for mentoring at the beginning as well, because sometimes I may have something that might be useful, but what's the phrase? Never know first, never know best. but never knowingly withhold information.
Yeah.
And actually, I think on occasion, there may be something of value to do that. But I'm getting much better at not jumping in.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. And this is such an important thing, right? Because I think that there's something for me. So when I mention that kind of bubbling up, so I always feel the knowing. I tend not to call it advice anymore because I've been programmed by all of my coach training that expertise is bad. It's a bad thing to be an expert. It creates I don't like the feeling it gives me now, right? So I talk about being a knower, right? Thinking I know. And it kind of creeps up. It rises up from my belly all the way up feels like it's coming up my throat, right? I can feel it building. And, as I was learning to coach and in the early days, I'm sure, in fact, I know, I'm happy to admit it fell out, right? It fell out of my mouth. And I was like, oh no, I've broken the rules. I'm a bad coach. And then I beat myself up about that, right? Mm-hmm. Beating ourselves up, right? But I think what's really interesting is that I know, and I think this is what you're describing, I know when it's happening. I can feel the knowing bubbling up. And then rather than suppressing it, which I think is where I was going wrong before, I now think, oh, that's curious. What's that knowing about? Because it could be that I'm going into I want to add value and I know best, or, I can fix this. Or it might be that I'm noticing something or seeing something in the client or in the system around the client that potentially they might not have seen yet. So it could be helpful to share it, to offer it, right? Or it could be telling me something else about me or about the client or about our relationship. Maybe the client has triggered me, or maybe the client has said, I wish you'd just tell me what to do. Oh, and then my knower is it's bubbling right up now because they've actually even asked me. I mean, amazing. Now I can get out. I can spill out and it'll be fine because they asked, right? They've given me permission. So there's something for me about how do we get curious about what's driving the knower? And to do that, we've got to be able to notice when it's coming rather than it's come out of my mouth. It's spilled out of my mouth and I can't take it back now. And self-compassion is such an important part of that because I think, and again, I'm curious if this is your experience having gone through the journey with me, because my sense is that we come out of our early coach development in a bit of a straitjacket, right? In a kind of, here are my rules. Here are the things I should do. Here are the things I shouldn't do. And many of those things, particularly kind of ethical things, they're important. But interestingly, I think even if it's not what we're being taught, what I think we're learning is I must stay and I must not about me, it's about them. It's not about me, it's about them. I mustn't bring too much of myself to this, and it becomes this sort of restrictive straitjacket. And so at some point many of us kind of want to go, I want to, this straitjacket isn't me. It just isn't me, right? And so I'm wondering for you now, what are you noticing about who you're becoming as a coach?
I think, I had to think about this, when I sort of set up my own business and wrote the little blurb all about me in there. And I thought, you know what, I love the phrase integrative coach because it means you can do a little bit of what you fancy, but no one's actually going to check on your work that you're doing it properly because you're doing what comes up for the client in the room. And I like the phrase, but that was almost giving me permission to not know all the models and bits and pieces. And actually, you know what? I am an integrative coach because that's what I've done all my life. I've worked with people as a doctor for years, so I might not be an expert coach, but actually I am an expert at working with people. And I think the fact is that I am actually able to create connection in a way that feels right. And I think I'm quite intuitive in that situation. So often I do understand or do kind of get a feel of what's moving forward. But I'm also not I try to be open and listen and offer rather than suggest, and so that it's gentle with what's coming back. And I'm happy to, it's not going in the right direction, or if I was to share something or ask a question, it would be perfectly acceptable for someone to say, no, that's not what it is at all. And I would be happy with that. And that doesn't feel challenging. It's just accepting that that's what's going on. And so, yeah, I think for me, the client connection is really important, and that's what drives that situation. And then, yeah, again, there are stuff sitting there, because also I deliver workshops. I work with quite a lot of the people I coach, and so there's an element of, that we did that in the workshop last week. Would it be really helpful to use it here?
Yeah,
and often they quite like that. But again, it's about what's coming out in this conversation and what's helpful and moving forward. And I think I'm getting better at doing less. I think I'm getting better at doing less and being more my authentic self, just providing that space to see where they want to go. And if they want to ask me because they're not feeling resourced or whatever, I'm happy to have that conversation. But it won't be a large part of the conversation. I will move back to a more open conversation.
Yeah, and look, there's lots in that bit, Jo. Thank you, because there's, you use the word offer, which, as you know, one of my favourite words. I think language is so important. And when we talk about make a suggestion or give advice, it feels so I'm going to tell you. And I just love the idea of offering something. And, whether they pick it up and run with it or not, that's their choice. I'm unattached to the perceived success of my offer, right? So this language is so important. And I think there's something for me, this authenticity thing is super important, because I'm imagining for a moment, let's say I'm a potential client of yours. I'm a doctor. I'm not, everyone knows that, but let's imagine I'm a doctor and I want to undertake some coaching, maybe around career development, let's say. And I come across your website or LinkedIn, or we connect in some way. And I look at your profile and I think, I think Jo could be the coach for me. She's been a doctor. She's a consultant, emergency medicine. Oh, okay. So she understands the pressure. She kind of gets it. I can see her career. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll meet with Jo. Let's see if we want to work together. Now, if you then show up in that session and don't own your experience and identity as a doctor, it's like, well, that's not authentic either, is it? And so if I'm sat here as your client and you're not sharing anything of yourself, like, well, hang on, I came to you, I chose you because I felt like you would get me. And, I've had coaches say to me before, when my client says, well, what do you think? I always say, well, it doesn't matter what I think. Tell me what you think. And it's like, but it does sometimes matter to them what you think, right? And the other thing, coming back to that idea of offering, the other thing I've learned with kind of my knower is that previously, before being a coach, my knower was attached to being right. So it wasn't just about knowing, it was also the knowing that what I knew was right, and we do that a lot at work, right? Me in my corporate world, and I'm sure you in medicine, that whole thing of, I am confident I'm right. This is the right way to do this. This is my perspective. And actually sometimes in my employed life, I would, that person is wrong and I'm right because I know. And so there's something also for me about separating the knower or the expert, as you described it, right, from being right. So I think I know. And I know for me in my experience, I know for me based on the kind of person I am, I know for me based on the situation and context I was in when it happened to me, whatever. I don't know for the person sat in front of me. And that was a real like, oh, okay. Because I had to find ways of talking to myself so that my expert would just quieten down a bit. Just, it's still there, but it would just quieten, and be in the background. So, yeah, I might know, but I know for me, and I don't know that I'm right for them. And I just think that's such an important perspective. And that's my language or my way of describing exactly what you just talked about, right? Can you imagine showing up and not owning your doctorness? I'm like,
No,
but it's not authentic, is it?
Exactly, it is and also again, that's my call to action. Really, is the fact is that I'm offering what I felt that. It's 9 years ago now that I would really have resonated, would have been really helpful for me at that time. And fundamentally, I think that there is a real lack of awareness of coaching in medicine. It's getting better. But when I told my colleagues I was going off to be a coach, why would they need coaching? They don't need fixing. And all those sort of, they don't understand the difference between coaching, they don't understand counselling, but it's all about, needing something and being fixed and being wrong and stuff like that. And actually, so far from the truth. You can't coach people if they aren't resourced. And so it is very much about understanding it's about performance and taking that shame away. So I feel really strongly about it, and I suppose that's why I don't just coach. I do workshops, and I also work with doctors that require more support, because I feel that actually as a profession we need to own the fact that we're human, that common humanity. That it's tough, it will affect us, and in fact, to be honest, do I want a doctor that's not affected by the things that are going on? Actually that connection, that empathy, that understanding is so important, but therefore we need to take stock and understand and look at ourselves, and also pulling out that career piece. You're not the same person in your 20s as you are in your 30s, 40s and 50s, and our life changes. A lot of what I was juggling with 10 years ago was having 3 children under the age of 10 and trying to be a perfect mum and a perfect doctor, and also a perfect leader in my village. Completely challenging myself with ridiculous expectations and never having actually prioritised self-care. So much of it within medicine is, that patient needs sorting out, or you can't, don't go for lunch, don't go to sleep, don't go and do that. That takes the priority. Work is done first, and for often for very good reasons. But not everything is life and death. In fact, very little of it is. And I used to see this when I was a consultant running the shop floor. If I would encourage my junior doctors to go, not junior doctors anymore, they're called resident doctors now, but resident doctors to go for a break, they were more efficient and more effective after a break. And so they go, "Oh, Jo, you're great, you're always giving." No, I'm actually prioritising workload. But you know what? The person who didn't go for a break was me, because just ridiculous.
You're different. You don't need a break.
Of course, I'm superhuman. I don't need one. And that's been one of the hardest things to do, is actually just recognise I am human, and give myself permission for that self-care piece, and not just sit in self-judgment.
Yeah. And I think, look, self-care is important across the piece, right? We talk about it a lot for coaches as well, right? Particularly, I'm turn this into a question rather than a statement, because I'm curious now, right? Because you're running your own business, you are your own boss, you can do as you wish with your time and your workload and your diary and all of those things, right? And so what's the adjustment been, or has there been an adjustment from in terms of self-care, from moving from that kind of medical environment, clinical environment, into, okay, you're your own boss now. So how do you deal with that self-care now?
So I'm more aware that it's something to recognise. So I think the piece I haven't mentioned is I left clinical practice 2 years ago because I was hitting burnout again. And actually, so much of that is an organisational factor. And I needed to change the environment that I worked in. And I was lucky that I had an educational role to step into. So there was a transition. But around that piece was recognising I couldn't keep doing the same old thing in the same old environment at the same old time. I need to start prioritising self-care and looking at it and realising that to create a sustainable career, there needed to be pockets for myself in that time. In order, and you fundamentally notice it, if you go into a coaching session unresourced, it doesn't go as well as if you go in with all that time and you've had a break and you pause, and so you do recognize it working one-to-one with people. So I have a much more I suppose I have a much more physiological routine now. So I go out and do my dog walk in the morning. I've had a dog in the last couple of years, and that's made a really big difference. So I have my morning connection with the dog walkers. I go out and get my fresh air. I go and get my melatonin. So my body clock is good, and so I sleep well. All of that, I never had that in medicine. So that has been really helpful as scaffolding to my routine in my daily life. When I left clinical practice, I took on anything and everything, to be honest, in order to prove that I was still useful and still worth it. And I actually have similar tendencies. You're a workaholic in an organisation, you still become I think it's very easy to fall into the workaholic trap when you're self-employed, and in fact, even more when your paycheck depends on the amount of work you've done. And so you're much more aware of fluctuations and things around that. And there are lots of challenges in self-employment that, oh my goodness, I was so unbelievably institutionalized. I didn't even have a Google Drive or anything when I left the NHS. So lots and lots of learning around that. So it has felt like there's been potential for overwhelm on occasions and reality of overwhelm on other occasions. But I think my journey is much more about understanding myself. I've got a couple of years now after leaving, and I'm beginning to reevaluate again. What do I need as an individual? I need a day off in the week. Okay, I need not to be completely booked to client, back to back, because actually I'm not able to deliver the quality of work that I would like to do. So it's not quantity, it's quality for me.
Yeah.
And I need, I've never been brilliant with boundaries.
Okay.
But boundaries are our own choice, aren't they? People don't trample on your boundaries. You don't maintain your boundaries. And so I'm beginning to realise that if I don't, it comes down to me. And I have more time and more reflective opportunity to realise what I need and what I don't.
Yeah. I mean, dog walk. I mean, we're fellow dog walkers. We've talked about that before, haven't we? I mean, I would literally, I think, have gone stir crazy, mad, insane, whatever the appropriate word is, without the company of dogs at home, because I'm working at home all the time. My husband's out working, so I'm literally on my own, other than obviously work, because I do most of my work like this. So it's lonely. So my two dogs, they're critical, and going out for a walk and all of the benefits of that. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without dogs. Now, I think everyone should have a dog. Now, I know that not everyone loves dogs, but I am a big dog lover. So I love, that's a common share we have.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're absolutely right. They create that routine in your life, don't they? And to a certain degree, I did think that when I started working from home, I had the tendency just to sit in front of a computer and get on with things. I did that when I was doing all those courses I was juggling together. Yes. I was in front of the computer for ages.
Yeah.
But the dog won't let me. She comes and sits next to me. You've had enough now.
Yeah, absolutely.
She comes and sits next to me after a Zoom call or a client call, and I say bye, and she knows exactly what bye means. It means you have to get up from the computer now, Mum, and walk around.
Absolutely. I get presented with tennis balls and all sorts of things. Brilliant.
Such unsubtle hints.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, they're not subtle, my two. Definitely not. And so I think this is such an important thing that you're sharing, Jo, because you're 2 years-ish in, aren't you, really, to kind of getting your business set up and your practice and deciding what work you want to do and don't want to do and all of those things. It's I don't know whether the first 2 years are the hardest. I don't know. I think every year brings its challenges, right? But I found in those first 2 years, all of that stuff, right? Business, understanding business, like you said, okay, I need a Google Drive and I need to set up my Outlook and I need this and I need that. And I don't have an IT department anymore. So when it breaks, it hurts because I've got no one to ask. Setting up, how am I going to do invoicing? Oh my goodness, the business admin, the admin of running a business, right? And then, the marketing and visibility. How do I let people know I'm here? And, why are they not just queued up outside my door? I thought that was what was going to happen. Do I do a website? Don't I do a website? Oh my goodness. It goes on and on. But I also think there's this real question. I know for me, very similar to you in those first few years, I did a lot of work that in retrospect, I probably should have said no to. I missed out on work that I wanted to do because I'd said yes to work that I probably didn't need to, all of those kind of things. But I also spent a lot of time working out what's the work that I want to do, because I came out of employed life and said, I just want to do more of the work I love. Well, what does that mean? Right. So I had to really discover rediscover what's the work that I love in this setting for me, in my own business, without a boss to tell me what to do, without a team around me supporting me. What's the work that I really want to do? And so I had to I felt I had to experience it and then go, oh, I'm never doing that again. That was just the most unmotivating, draining. No, not for me, not doing that anymore. And then, oh my goodness, that is it. That's the thing. I loved it. I want to do more of that. So there's a real kind of discovery as well of the work you want to do, plus all of the identity stuff that we talked about at the beginning, right? You're shifting in your identity. You're working out what, being self-employed actually means. It's a lot, I think, right? It's a lot. And so Jo, what would you say? And I'm kind of thinking like there's probably going to be people listening, right, who are going to be further along than you are, that are going to be newer than you are, different. And what I'm wondering is if people are listening and thinking, I want to do what you've done, leave employed and become, or, I'm a year in, or I'm 6 months in and I'm struggling, or what have been your most important, and there will have been lots, so maybe pick two or three. What have been your most kind of important lessons for you in those kind of first 2 years that may or may not, we don't know, be helpful for other coaches to hear, do you think?
Okay, so I think of all of it, the most important thing is trust your gut. And that actually, if you really trust your gut, because you're probably right, because you've been doing this for years, and there is some neuroscience behind why the gut tends to align, and it tends to resonate when it's either in accordance with your values or something or whatever. So trust your gut.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, so these are lessons that I should be having up on my wall in front of me. Press pause when you're not sure. Don't rush to answer. I tend to say yes rather than say no to things. And I need to learn to pause, reflect, and work out, is this right for me now?
Yeah.
Yes, when I'm less resourced, I'm more likely to say yes. And that I think that fundamentally it is a really wonderful opportunity to go off and do something different, but it's also hard. And so I think one of the things that worked quite well for me was that I had a foot in both camps. So I'm still employed at the moment, and that's ticked along, brought the money in at the same time. I'm lucky it's work that I do like. but it's ticked along in the background so that I've been able to grow my business organically in the way that I felt I wanted to, because it comes in fits and starts. There are times when you feel massively empowered and you can take on this, that, and the other. And as you say, when the IT goes wrong, whatever, I sit quite a lot in my left brain. Mm-hmm. And quite a lot of the business stuff is quite creative. It's quite organic. It's like pulling on stuff that I've never utilized before. And, if I've just had to sort out an IT problem, I then can't write a LinkedIn newsletter. I just can't. It doesn't work. So there are times when you feel productive and times that you don't. And so I think having an income stream, it may not have been the ideal income stream, but it gave me the opportunity to grow the business in the way that felt right. And don't underestimate. There is so much that comes out. All this call to courage, within as a coaching comes up with setting a new business. The whole, I'm not good enough. The whole comparison, the whole scarcity. All of those arena moments come out as you're putting yourself on the line, and you're turning up with vulnerability as well. You're suddenly not an organisation with that integrity that goes with it and all of that knowledge. You're just turning up as I'm turning up as a burnt out doctor, clearly I feel actually, I actually feel quite proud of being able to turn out with that now. But, fundamentally, there are colleagues who will see that in me. But actually, what I have to recognise is the ones I'm not their coach. I'm coaching the people that can recognise that, can see that within themselves, and are actually looking to move that forward. And so some people won't like me either, and I'm fundamentally a people pleaser, so that's quite difficult as well. So, but I'm trying to be authentic, and I like the fact I can be authentically me.
It is a constant journey, isn't it? That because in order to be authentically us, we have to do the work to know ourselves well enough to be authentic, right? I always remember I was doing a leadership development program or 10 years or more ago now, and we were talking about authenticity. And one of the leaders in the room said, I hate this word authentic. It's overused. I said, fair enough. I mean, that happens all the time, doesn't it? But they said, I just think that people are using it, and excuse the expression, but these were his words. He said, I think people are just using it as an excuse to be an arse. Oh, yes, but I'm being authentically me. You know what I mean? And it really stuck with me, because I thought, that's so true, that that's not what being authentic means, right? Authentic means I've done the work. I'm self-aware. I know myself. I know my values. I know what's important to me. I know what my struggles are. I know what my development areas are. I know who I am. So I'm always, that's the journey, right? And that developing that authenticity is constant, because you will change, the business change, your clients change. So we're doing that work all the time. That's the hard work that sits almost, for me, it almost sits like at the core of all of the other stuff that we've talked about around, the business and the practice and learning the skill. But at the core of it all is, you and who you are and how well you know yourself. And I mean, what I really like, Jo, as well, is that I think your journey represents the sort of how I see courage, in as much as, yes, there are some bold moves, right? There are some, do you know what? I think I want to set up my own coaching practice. I think I want to go independent. I'm going to make it happen. And there's courage in that, right? And it's a bold step to make that decision and to move away, particularly from not just a career, but something, I don't know what the right word is. Is it a vocation? I don't know what the right word is, but there's lots wrapped up in that whole word doctor, which is probably a whole other podcast episode, might not even be the Courageous Coach podcast. I don't know. But so there's just this sense for me that but there's lots of, you've got your big stuff, but you also recognize, and you talked about it today, is all of the little acts of courage that you do as well, right? All the time. And even that's the kind of, the courage to say no or to say yes, or the courage to step away from your desk and go walk around the garden with the dog who's doing the puppy dog eyes at you. All of these really small moments that those are the choice point between, do I choose courage or do I choose comfort? We're constantly on that journey, right? It's not a done. It's not in your case, it's not, well, I've done the courses, I've got the qualifications, now I'm done, right? You're still doing the work. And I think that's where qualifications and certifications and programs and courses are at their most powerful, when the person is prepared to take that learning away and continue to do the work. It's when they go, oh, look, I've got a certificate that says I'm a coach, but they haven't continued the work, right? So, Jo, to close off our conversation then, I asked you, what are some of your kind of most important lessons from kind of being in that kind of that early stage, those first 2 years of your own business? But let's come back to my question around, that I always close with, around what's the one thing that you think all coaches should know about courage?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've kind of taken, you've kind of stolen it from your last comment, really, about what I was thinking about. But I suppose it's the courage to be yourself, and actually to be proudly going into that situation, all warts and all, and being vulnerable in that space, because that mirroring effect, that creation of an honest environment for the client, will create that trust, build up those layers of trust, so that actually the work can happen in that room in that client's best interest, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think it is, just turning up and trusting the process.
Yeah. Showing up and being seen, right? We always think turning up, right? Showing up and being seen. I love that idea of a mirror, because don't we talk about being a mirror, holding the mirror up for our clients so they can see themselves more clearly. But there's also something about that mirroring of, how you show up, how open and honest and courageous and vulnerable you are. There's that contagious thing again, isn't it? There's a mirroring back and forth of that. Like that idea. Lovely. Thank you, Jo. Thank you for joining me today and for sharing really openly about your journey, because I know many people listening will be at a similar point, an earlier point, a later point, wherever, right? But it's just so rich to hear someone share their story, right? Where they've come from and where they're going. So thank you for that. I really appreciate your openness. And I can't wait to see what's next, right? And continue to walk alongside you. It's a real privilege. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you today. Thank you very much for for the opportunity, and just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It's been so wonderful to have you along my journey, to be able to have these conversations with you on a regular basis, so that I can grow into my coaching and into myself, really. So thank you.
It's a privilege, Jo. Thank you so much for being here, and take good care. Go to play with that dog in the garden. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Coach podcast. I hope it gave you something to reflect on, something to feel, and maybe even something to act on. If you've been nodding along or feeling that tug of recognition, you're not alone. These conversations are here to remind us that courage isn't about having it all figured out. It's about showing up, doing the inner work, and being willing to be seen, even when it feels uncomfortable. If that sounds like the kind of coaching journey you want to go deeper into, I'd love to invite you to check out the Courageous Coach program. It's designed especially for qualified coaches in the early years of building their independent practice. Those who want to coach with more courage, clarity, and humanity, and grow a business that truly reflects who they are. You'll find all the details over on my website, and I've popped the link in the show notes to make it easy for you. And if we're not already connected, come and find me on LinkedIn. Whether you've got questions about the program, want to share what's resonated for you in this episode, or you just fancy a chat. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know another coach who might need a little courage boost, pass it on. Courage is contagious, after all. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay human, and keep choosing courage.